The iron bars cast long shadows across the stone floor of the jail cell as the October sun filtered through the small, barred window. Emma Carter sat on the narrow cot, her hands resting protectively over her swollen belly, tried to ignore the cold that seemed to seep through the walls of the Willow Creek jailhouse. At 7 months pregnant, she felt each movement of her unborn child like a reminder of the impossible situation she found herself in. Sheriff Luke Granger paused outside her cell, a steaming cup of coffee in his weathered hands, and concern etched across his face. At 34, Luke had seen plenty of hardship in his years keeping the peace in this small Montana Territory town, but something about Emma's situation troubled him more than most. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I brought you some coffee. Doc Peterson says you need to keep your strength up." Emma looked up, her green eyes reflecting a weariness that went far deeper than physical exhaustion. She was young, couldn't be more than 22, but her face held the kind of sadness that aged a person beyond their years. "Thank you, Sheriff," she replied softly, accepting the cup through the bars. Her voice carried the refined accent of someone who had received a proper education, which only made her current circumstances more puzzling to Luke. "Emma," Luke said, settling into the wooden chair he had positioned outside her cell 3 days ago when she'd first been brought in. "I've been thinking about your situation. The territorial judge won't be through town for another 2 weeks, and when he gets here, I know what will happen." Emma interrupted, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Unmarried women who bring shame to the community don't fare well in frontier justice." Luke frowned at the injustice of it all. Emma had been arrested for vagrancy and moral turpitude, charges that basically amounted to being pregnant and alone in a town that had little tolerance for women without male protection. The local preacher had been particularly vocal about making an example of her, claiming her presence would corrupt the moral fiber of their God-fearing community. "Tell me again how you ended up here," Luke said, though he'd heard her story twice already. Something about it didn't sit right with him. Not that he doubted her honesty, but rather that he sensed she was leaving out important details. Emma sipped her coffee slowly, as if gathering strength from its warmth. "I was traveling with a wagon train from Illinois, heading to Oregon Territory. The baby's father had promised to meet me in Portland and marry me there." Her voice caught slightly. "But when we stopped in Bozeman for supplies, I received a telegram saying he had changed his mind. He'd married someone else, someone more suitable to his family's expectations." "So you left the wagon train?" "What choice did I have? I couldn't continue to Oregon with no one to meet me, and I didn't have enough money to return to Illinois. I thought perhaps I could find work in Bozeman, or maybe here in Willow Creek." Emma's laugh was bitter. "I suppose I was naive about how willing people would be to employ a pregnant woman with no husband." Luke studied her face, noting the way her eyes avoided his when she spoke about the baby's father. There was more to that story, he was certain, but he didn't press. Everyone had secrets, especially people who ended up in his jail. "What about your family back in Illinois?" "Surely they would. My parents died of fever 2 years ago," Emma said quickly. "I have no other family. No one who would claim me now." The helplessness in her voice made Luke's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He'd been a lawman for 8 years, had seen plenty of people in desperate situations, but something about Emma touched him in a way that was both protective and deeply personal. "Emma," he said carefully, "what if there was another option? Something that would give you and the baby legal protection and respectability?" She looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Luke stood and paced to the window, gathering his thoughts. He'd been considering this idea for 2 days now, ever since Doc Peterson had examined Emma and confirmed that both she and the baby were healthy. The plan was crazy, impractical, and would certainly cause talk in town. But it was also the only way he could see to save her from the harsh judgment that awaited when the territorial judge arrived. "Territorial law is clear about unmarried mothers," Luke said, turning back to face her. "But it's equally clear about the rights of married women and their children. A woman with a husband's name and protection can't be charged with moral turpitude." Emma's eyes widened as she began to understand what he was suggesting. "Sheriff Granger, you can't possibly mean—" "I mean exactly what you think I mean," Luke said, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. "Marry me, Emma. Let me give you my name and the protection that comes with it." Give your child a father and a legitimate place in this world. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language, her coffee cup forgotten in her hands. "You don't even know me," she finally whispered. "You don't know what kind of woman I am, what mistakes I've made. I could be exactly what the townspeople think I am." "Are you?" Luke asked simply. "No," Emma said firmly, meeting his eyes directly for the first time since the conversation began. "I'm not. But that doesn't change the fact that you would be binding yourself to a stranger and taking responsibility for another man's child." Luke moved closer to the bars, close enough that he could see the tears forming in her green eyes. "Emma, I've been sheriff of this town for 6 years. Before that, I served in the cavalry for 4 years during the war. I've seen enough suffering to last several lifetimes, and I've learned to recognize genuine goodness when I see it. You're a good woman caught in bad circumstances through no fault of your own. But marriage, sheriff, that's a sacred bond. It shouldn't be entered into lightly, certainly not to solve my problems." "Who says it would be entered into lightly?" Luke asked quietly. "Emma, I'm 34 years old. I've never been married because I never found a woman I thought I could build a life with. Maybe this isn't how either of us imagined finding a spouse, but sometimes the most important things in life come when you least expect them." Emma set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. "What would you expect from such a marriage?" "I wouldn't. I couldn't. I would expect nothing you weren't willing to give freely," Luke assured her. "This would be a marriage of protection and mutual respect. Anything beyond that would develop naturally, if it developed at all. And if it didn't? If we remained strangers sharing a name?" Luke considered this seriously. "Then we would remain strangers sharing a name. But Emma, your child would have a father, you would have legal protection, and neither of you would face the world alone." Outside the jail, the church bell chimed 5 o'clock, its sound echoing through the small town as people prepared for evening meals and family time. Luke watched Emma's face as she absorbed his offer, seeing hope war with disbelief in her expression. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Luke thought about his answer carefully. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because everyone deserves a second chance. And because—" He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "Because maybe we could save each other." Emma stared at Luke through the iron bars, her heart racing as she tried to process his extraordinary offer. Marriage to a man she had known for only 3 days. A good man, certainly, but still a stranger. The rational part of her mind screamed that it was impossible, impractical, unfair to both of them. But the desperate part of her heart, the part that feared for her unborn child's future, whispered that it might be the miracle she had prayed for. "Sheriff Granger," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to understand what you're offering. I haven't told you everything about my situation." Luke pulled his chair closer to the bars, his brown eyes serious but kind. "Then tell me now. If we're going to do this, there should be honesty between us." Emma took a shaky breath, her hands instinctively moving to her belly. "The man who fathered this child, he wasn't just some suitor who changed his mind. He was my employer's son. I worked as a governess for the Ashford family in Springfield." Her voice grew smaller. "Robert Ashford was charming, attentive. He said he loved me, promised we would marry after he finished his business degree. But he was lying," Luke said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn in his expression. "Not lying exactly. I think he meant it at the time. But when I told him about the baby, everything changed. Suddenly, I was an inconvenience, a problem that needed to be solved quietly." Emma's voice turned bitter. "His father offered me money to disappear, to never mention Robert's name in connection with the child. When I refused, they dismissed me without references and made sure no other family in Springfield would hire me." Luke felt anger burning in his chest at the casual cruelty of powerful men who could destroy lives without consequence. "So you joined the wagon train to escape. It seemed like the only option. Robert had promised to meet me in Oregon. I suppose I still hoped he would change his mind, do the right thing." Emma laughed harshly. "The telegram I received in Bozeman made it clear that Hope was foolish. He'd married a banker's daughter, someone suitable to his station." "Emma," Luke said gently, None of that changes my offer. If anything, it makes me more certain that it's the right thing to do. But don't you see? Marrying me won't just mean taking on a pregnant stranger. It means standing against the kind of men who destroyed my reputation. The Ashfords have money, influence. If they ever discover where I am, let them come, Luke said firmly. I've dealt with bullies before, Emma. Rich ones, poor ones, they're all the same underneath. And this is my town, my jurisdiction. You and your child will be under my protection. Emma studied his face, seeing the strength there, the quiet confidence of a man who had faced danger and emerged intact. For the first time since arriving in Willow Creek, she felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build a safe life for her child. There's something else, she said slowly. Something I need you to know before you make this decision final. Luke waited patiently as Emma gathered her courage to speak words she had never said aloud. I've never, that is, Robert and I, we never. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. What happened between us wasn't. I didn't want it. Not the way it happened. Understanding flickered in Luke's eyes, followed immediately by a protective fury that made Emma's breath catch. Emma, are you telling me he forced himself on you? Not violently, not exactly. But I was young, alone, dependent on his family for my livelihood. When he began paying attention to me, I was flattered. And when he said he loved me, that we would marry, Emma's voice broke slightly. I believed him. I trusted him. And one night, when his parents were away, he convinced me that proving my love was the natural thing to do between engaged people. Luke's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle when he spoke. Emma, that wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault. The world doesn't see it that way, Emma replied sadly. A woman in my position is always to blame, always the one who tempted or led astray a good man. Then the world is wrong, Luke said with quiet conviction. And any man who would take advantage of a young woman's trust and then abandon her to face the consequences alone is no man at all. Silence fell between them as Emma absorbed his words. She had lived with shame and self-blame for so long that hearing someone, especially a man, declare her innocence felt like a balm to wounds she had thought would never heal. Sheriff Granger, Luke, she said finally, if I accept your offer, what would you tell people? How would you explain our sudden marriage? Luke had clearly thought about this. I'd tell them the truth, that you're a good woman who found herself in difficult circumstances, and that I'm honored to offer you my protection and my name. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. And the baby? When it's born, people will count the months. Let them count. The child will be born a Granger, with all the rights and protections that name carries in this territory. Luke leaned forward slightly. Emma, I need you to understand something. If you accept my proposal, I will claim that child as mine in every way that matters. He or she will never know shame or rejection because of the circumstances of their birth. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks as the full weight of his offer sank in. This man, this good, honorable man, was offering her everything she had lost: respectability, protection, a future for her child, and perhaps most importantly, the chance to be valued and defended rather than condemned and abandoned. Why me? She whispered. Surely there are other women in town who would be grateful for your attention. Women without my complications. Luke was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Maybe, he said finally. But Emma, in 3 days of talking with you, I've seen more strength, grace, and genuine goodness than I've encountered in years. You could have let your circumstances make you bitter or cruel, but instead you've remained kind and thoughtful. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. And if I'm not able to be a real wife to you, the baby, my experiences, I don't know if I can ever trust that way again. Then we'll take it one day at a time, Luke said simply. Emma, I'm not proposing because I expect anything from you except honesty and partnership. If love grows between us, wonderful. If not, we'll have built something good anyway. A safe home for your child and companionship for both of us. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her, as if sensing the importance of the moment. When she opened them again, Luke was still watching her with patient kindness, waiting for her decision without pressure or demand. "Yes," she said quietly, the word feeling both terrifying and liberating. "Yes, Luke, I'll marry you." Luke's smile was radiant, transforming his serious face completely. "Thank you, Emma, for trusting me with your future and your child's future. I promise you won't regret it." As the evening shadows lengthened across the jail cell floor, both Emma and Luke felt the weight of the commitment they had just made. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they prepare to face the town as an engaged couple. But tonight, for the first time in months, Emma fell asleep feeling safe and hopeful about the future. The next morning brought crisp October air and the inevitable confrontation Luke had been dreading. Word of his intention to marry the pregnant prisoner had spread through Willow Creek like wildfire, and by the time he arrived at his office, a delegation of concerned citizens was waiting for him. "Luke," said Mayor Harrison, a portly man with a perpetually worried expression, "we need to discuss this situation with the Carter woman." Behind the mayor stood Reverend Samuel Mitchell, the town's preacher who had been most vocal about making an example of Emma. His thin face wore an expression of righteous disapproval that made Luke's jaw tighten. "Sheriff Granger," Reverend Mitchell began without preamble, "surely you understand that marrying this woman sends the wrong message to our community. We cannot be seen to reward immoral behavior." Luke poured himself coffee with deliberate calm, using the time to control his temper. "Reverend, last time I checked, showing Christian charity to those in need was considered a virtue, not a vice. Christian charity doesn't require marriage," the preacher replied stiffly. "There are other ways to help fallen women that don't compromise the moral standing of respected members of the community." "Such as?" Luke asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "The territorial authorities have facilities for women of her condition, places where she could receive proper guidance and where the child could be placed with a suitable family." Luke set down his coffee cup with enough force to make the other men flinch. "You're talking about taking her child away from her and sending her to what amounts to a prison for the crime of being pregnant and alone, for the crime of bringing shame to our community," Mayor Harrison interjected nervously. "Luke, you're a good man, but you can't save every lost soul that wanders into town." "I'm not trying to save every lost soul," Luke replied firmly. "Just this one. And Mayor, if helping a woman in need brings shame to this community, then maybe we need to take a long look at what kind of community we've become." Reverend Mitchell's face flushed red. "Sheriff, that woman is unmarried and carrying another man's child. By marrying her, you're essentially condoning adultery and fornication. By marrying her, I'm giving an innocent child a name and a future," Luke shot back. "Unless you'd prefer I let that baby be born a bastard and face a lifetime of shame for circumstances beyond its control." The argument was interrupted by the arrival of Doc Peterson, a grizzled man in his 60s who had been the town's physician for over 20 years. He nodded to the assembled men, but addressed Luke directly. "Sheriff, I just finished examining Miss Carter again. Both she and the baby are doing well, but she needs proper rest and nutrition. That jail cell isn't doing either of them any favors, which is why I'm marrying her and taking her home," Luke said, grateful for the doctor's implicit support. Doc Peterson nodded approvingly. "Good. She's been through enough hardship. What she needs now is care and kindness, not judgment." "Doctor," Reverend Mitchell protested, "surely you can't approve of this hasty marriage." "Reverend," Doc Peterson replied dryly, "in my 40 years of practice, I've learned that God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he sends help in forms we don't expect. Maybe instead of questioning Sheriff Granger's motives, we should be thanking him for his generosity." After the delegation left, still grumbling but unable to argue further, Luke walked back to Emma's cell. She was sitting up, obviously having heard at least part of the heated discussion in his office. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I told you this would cause problems for you. Emma, the only problem I have is with small-minded people who think they have the right to judge others." Luke unlocked her cell door. "Come on, let's go get you some proper breakfast, and then we'll visit Reverend Mitchell about performing the ceremony." Emma's eyes widened. "After what just happened, he'll never agree to marry us." "Oh, he'll marry us," Luke said grimly. Because if he doesn't, I'll ride to the next town and find a preacher who will. And then I'll come back and ask the good people of Willow Creek why their spiritual leader refused to perform a Christian marriage. As they walked through town toward the cafe, Emma was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. Some faces showed curiosity, others disapproval, but she also caught glimpses of sympathy from a few of the women. Mothers who perhaps understood that circumstances could change anyone's fate. At the cafe, Mrs. Abernathy, the owner's wife, served them with professional courtesy but obvious reservations. As Emma ate her first real meal in days, Luke noticed how she unconsciously shielded her belly with one arm, a protective gesture that had probably become second nature. "Luke," Emma said softly, "are you certain about this? It's not too late to change your mind." "Emma, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Luke reached across the table and gently covered her free hand with his. "You and that baby deserve a chance at happiness. I'm honored to be the one who can give it to you." The simple touch of his hand sent an unexpected warmth through Emma. She had grown so accustomed to fear and suspicion that his easy kindness felt like a revelation. For the first time, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story could have a happy ending. "When?" she asked quietly. "This afternoon, if Reverend Mitchell agrees. Tomorrow at the latest." Luke's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "Emma, I want you to know that once we're married, you'll never have to be afraid again. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together." As they finished their meal, both Luke and Emma felt the weight of the commitment they were about to make. In a few hours, they would be husband and wife, bound together by law and hope rather than love. But sometimes, Luke reflected, the best foundations were built on respect and shared purpose. Love, if it came, would grow from there. Outside the cafe window, the autumn sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and amber, promising that even in the midst of uncertainty, beauty and hope could still be found. The wedding ceremony took place that afternoon in the small church, with only Doc Peterson and his wife Martha as witnesses. Reverend Mitchell performed the service with grudging compliance, his disapproval evident in every word, but Luke had been right. The preacher couldn't risk the scandal of refusing to marry them. Emma wore a simple blue dress that Martha Peterson had kindly lent her, along with a small bouquet of late-season wildflowers. Despite the circumstances, she felt a strange sense of peace as she stood beside Luke, speaking vows she had never expected to make. "Do you, Luke Granger, take Emma Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Luke said firmly, his voice carrying clearly through the nearly empty church. "And do you, Emma Carter, take Luke Granger to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" Emma looked into Luke's steady brown eyes and saw nothing but kindness and sincerity. "I do," she whispered, meaning it more than she had expected. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Mitchell's tone suggested he was pronouncing a death sentence rather than a marriage. "You may kiss the bride." The kiss was gentle and brief, but Emma felt something warm unfurl in her chest at the tender touch of Luke's lips. When they separated, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "Mrs. Granger," he said softly, testing her new name. "Mrs. Granger," she repeated, and for the first time in months, she smiled with genuine happiness. Luke's house was modest but well-maintained, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor that spoke of a man who valued comfort over luxury. As he showed Emma around what was now her home, she was struck by how thoughtfully he had prepared for her arrival. "I've set up the larger bedroom for you," he said, opening the door to reveal a room with fresh linens, a comfortable chair by the window, and even a small vase of flowers on the dresser. "I'll take the smaller room. I want you to be comfortable." Emma touched the soft quilt on the bed, fighting back tears at his consideration. "Luke, this is beautiful. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said simply. "Emma, this is your home now. I want you to feel safe and welcome here." Over the following weeks, they settled into a routine that surprised them both with its natural ease. Luke continued his duties as sheriff while Emma gradually took over the household tasks, finding pleasure in creating a true home for the first time since leaving Illinois. Her pregnancy progressed smoothly, and under Doc Peterson's care and Luke's protection, she began to bloom. The town's reaction remained mixed, but gradually some of the hostility faded as people observed Luke's obvious happiness and Emma's quiet dignity. She began attending church services, sitting beside Luke with her head held high, and slowly won over some of the women with her genuine kindness and gentle manner. One evening in November, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Emma felt the baby move more vigorously than usual. She gasped and placed her hand on her belly, drawing Luke's immediate attention. "What is it? Are you all right?" "The baby," Emma said with wonder in her voice. "I think." "Luke, give me your hand." Without hesitation, Luke moved to sit beside her on the sofa and placed his palm where she guided it. Almost immediately, he felt a strong kick against his hand, and his face lit up with amazement. "That's incredible," he breathed. "So strong already. He or she is very active tonight," Emma said, then paused, looking uncertain. "Luke, would you like to feel for yourself when the baby moves? I know it's not really yours, but—" "Emma," Luke said firmly, his hands still resting on her belly, "this baby is mine in every way that matters. I would be honored to share these moments with you." As they sat together, feeling the child move beneath Luke's gentle touch, something shifted between them. The careful politeness that had characterized their relationship began to give way to something warmer, more intimate. Emma found herself leaning against Luke's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her with natural protectiveness. "Luke," Emma said softly, "I need to tell you something. These past weeks, living here with you, feeling safe and cared for, I'm starting to have feelings I never expected to have again." Luke's arm tightened around her. "What kind of feelings?" "Feelings for you. Real feelings, not just gratitude." Emma turned to look at him, her green eyes serious. "I know this marriage was meant to be practical, but Luke, I think I'm falling in love with my husband." Luke's heart raced as he cupped her face gently in his free hand. "Emma, I've been falling in love with you since that first day in the jail. I just didn't want to pressure you or make you feel obligated. And now I want to ask if you'd like to make this marriage real in every sense. If you're ready, if you want to." Emma's answer was to lean forward and kiss him, a kiss that spoke of healing and hope and the promise of a love that had grown from the most unlikely beginnings. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, and the careful distance they had maintained for weeks had disappeared completely. "Yes," Emma whispered against his lips. "Yes, I want this to be real." As winter settled over Willow Creek and Emma's pregnancy entered its final months, the Granger household became a place of quiet joy and anticipation. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had transformed into something neither of them had dared to hope for, a love story built on respect, kindness, and the courage to trust again. In the warm glow of their firelit parlor, with Emma's head resting on Luke's shoulder and their unborn child moving beneath his protective hand, both knew they had found something precious and rare. Sometimes the best love stories began not with passion, but with compassion, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, they led to both.